Welcome to Good Money. Clothes are oppressive. Nudists got it right.
Really didn't see that coming.
Sorry. Welcome back.
We were just talking about tanning, actually. As you can tell, Marc is substantially darker than he usually is.
I'm working
look at
hard in the garden.
Look at this complexion of his.
And by working hard, I mean tanning.
Yep. He does not have one of those tanning mirrors like some of our neighbors do. We're just going to get off this topic. I think that's the important side of all this.
You're back. That's what's important. You're not a Skype call anymore. I don't have to look at the little
yeah, actually, I think we should
Jacob.
show this to people.
So if you haven't seen this before, Jacob was in England pretending to be an academic. And so I had to look at this picture.
This is I didn't know what this looked like until I got home last night.
Show it to the camera.
Which one is it? Yeah.
That one.
It's remarkably similar.
Yeah, I'm really glad you're back. That's all I'm saying. That guy haunted me. Extremely haunted.
Yeah. And you know, when I was over in England, I got to thinking one day. It was an amazing experience. I think I'm going to do it again. But what I came up with that day was nothing that I actually came up with on my own. It's all St. Thomas. I was reading through St. Thomas, and St. Thomas at one point says that there are 6 telltale signs of how to discern whether or not your city is obsessed with money.
Okay.
And I thought, man, this sounds like a great talk. St. Thomas.
6 signs that your city is obsessed with money. You won't believe number 5. They're still doing those kind of like listicle things.
I think so. I mean, that's.
Seen them in a while.
I think Jordan Peterson just came out with 12 more rules for life.
You won't believe number 11.
It's always the second to last one.
I like talking about how a city is obsessed because it fits very well with the kind of social vision of Christianity, which doesn't buy into this individualism thing. I mean, if you read Revelations, Jesus in the Last Judgment, or what seems to me to be pretty much the Last Judgment or a prefiguration of it, is talking to cities and churches. He's not so much talking to individuals, although presumably they're in there. But I think having a understanding of a particular city having a vice is something which kind of already strikes against the modern notion of individualism, which is like, wow, how could you say that about a group?
Well, people say that kind of about friend groups, like you are whom you hang out with. But the idea of a city is that it gets to the point where your mores aren't defined just by the people you're hanging out with, but those whom you're not hanging out with.
Right.
Yeah. For example, I don't eat food the way that you eat food, but I do eat food in the way that kind of the average American eats food.
Do you know why I eat so much food?
Because you work in the garden a lot, getting your tan.
It's not even that. It's that the only way I can write is if I'm really hungry. It's this weird thing. So sometimes people ask me, like, for writer's advice. It happens very rarely, but that's what I tell them. Try not eating, see if it works. But then the problem is you hit this time of day and your friend's like, let's do a podcast. And you're like, okay, well, I got to eat.
Try that out, everyone, and let us know how it goes.
Fueled by starvation.
Yep. What were we even talking about?
6 ways to know that your city is obsessed, chronically obsessed, morbidly fascinated with money.
Yep. Well, so actually he comes at it this way because he's in the conversation about what is politics all about. And his answer is virtue. And the reason why his answer is virtue is because our ultimate end is heaven.
Awesome.
And virtue is a way that we clothe ourselves with Christ. And so as we do that, that's the way that we become saints. It's the way that what our entire cities are for, that we all might become saints and that we might dwell eternally with God. So
that's super rad. Accumulate virtues, the only treasure that a moth can't get at.
It's true. Moths get at a lot. And and we got a great bank manager up top, so Christ won't lose the funds. And so St. Thomas asks the question, what happens if virtue is not the end of politics, if that's not the point of politics? And he says, what happens if a city is obsessed with just living, just with life, or with health instead? And he says that everything will be changed, that that slaves will live with their masters and that animals will live with people. Now, the slave thing might sound kind of strange, or servants and not slaves. The servants one might sound a little bit strange, but I think what he's getting at there is that it's a destruction of a hierarchy, is that we'll start to think more in egalitarian terms. But the animal one is just kind of creepy because, like, you know, there's over a third of Americans today that think that animals should have the same rights as people, which I don't really know what that means, but it's true. And
that don't make no sense. But don't you think that
and just like vets, you know how much we're going to spend as Americans on vets this next year?
No.
You want to take a wild guess?
I'm bad with numbers and large crowds.
There's nobody else here.
A billion smackaroos.
52 billion.
52. I mean, that sounds bad, but I don't know. How much are we going to spend on like scooters? Like, is it more or less?
Can we
I don't
look
know.
that up?
No, let's not look that up. Okay,
look
point
that
is, Aquinas was onto something in that a society that values biological life as its value is obviously going to, because biological life exists more on a continuum. I don't like the servants masters bit because it just seems like, I don't know, something that would be hard to understand today.
Yeah.
In any particular helpful way. The animals bit I get. I mean, when you have biological life crowned, then there's nothing particularly special about the human person who's intellectual as well as biological.
Yeah. No, we could talk about trying to place the former comment in its historical place, and I think that it would be illuminating, but it's not the point for today, because then he goes on and asks, okay, what if virtue's not the end? And what if health's not the end? What if just accumulation of riches is the end? And he gives us 6 ways to identify, or to say, well, he doesn't even give us these ways. He just says these things will happen. And he lists out 6 things.
All right.
So I was thinking we could go through those 6 things. So, and then we can also do the fun thing about figuring out whether or not these apply to our modern society.
Okay.
What's your guess? You think they're going to apply or not?
I think they will. Otherwise, this would be a lame podcast.
Okay. Number 1, he said all things will be for sale. So,
well, that makes sense. If what you want is money, the only way you're getting money is by selling things.
Therefore,
or printing it.
Or printing it, yeah. Well, I think there's something to say about if virtue's your end.
Yeah.
Well, the pinnacle of all the virtues is what? It's charity, right? And if all of a sudden virtue and charity on top it's not the end, there's something else that's going to be the crowning motivation to your habits rather than love. And money would be that way, that thing. And so if I think that it makes some sense that he sees that there's going to be some need to replace the highest of all virtues. But I think there's also just something more commonsensical of how he saw this coming, and that's that you only ask somebody, or you only pay somebody to do something if you don't have confidence that you can ask them to do it for you. So I think we've probably given this example a million times, but if you need to move a refrigerator, you can either pay a moving company or you can ask your friends. And so money really does take the place for where love lacks. Now, there's also the side of this too, is that, well, what if most of the time when you really do need money, it's trading with people you just don't know. And I think that's kind of hidden in all this as well, in this idea that all things will be for sale, is that you are just not going to know your neighbors as well as you otherwise would. I think there's something hidden in this.
You know what I've always thought is that what's really cool about being Christian, besides attaining heaven and avoiding the pains of hell, is that there's things that money just can't buy. And that's a beautiful thought. And many pop singers have sung about it, but they're all sellouts, so what do they know? But in fact, there's a sense of purpose in the world, because all the money stuff will pass away for the Christian. It's not important in the end. But that allows you to simply have things of value where there's not even a conceivable price or exchange for it. And most people experience this in relationships of love, right? But I think Christianity allows you to expand those relationships of love to, I would never trade a thriving city for money. I would never trade the peace of a community for money. I would never trade the beauty of like a particular instance of beauty for money. You start to stake out these moments of resistance, I think, to everything being for sale. But I'd also say that I think Aquinas is sort of spooky, right? In not just in terms of like what would result from widespread greed or desire for gain, but also in terms of a eerie description of private property, right? Where private property within liberalism becomes understood as just that which I can mark off from the common, like mark off from it being a good for everyone.
Yeah.
Declare my own in some way, and then by necessity it also becomes an object of exchange.
Yeah.
Like the rise of capitalism was predicated on the creation of things for sale that were never seen as being for sale.
Totally.
Like quite literally land, when we talk about the enclosure of the commons as being something that began capitalism. It was common land used by everyone, governed by custom.
How can you claim it for yourself when God created it?
God created it,
Clearly he's the owner.
and there's 100 of ugly peasants that use it and love it.
And
but
even more beautiful peasants. Yeah.
There are none of those. I've seen the studies. I've read them.
Well, and it is kind of something, I mean, it is interesting. So there's two kind of modern examples.
Okay.
Point to prove that this exists today. One is the NFT market, the non-fungible tokens.
Oh my gosh.
I
know about this now. I hate it. I hate knowing about it.
Yeah, it's horrible.
And you know what? I'm going to sell that feeling of hate to the highest bidder. Whoever wants it, we'll put it in the blockchain. You ever find yourself just saying words knowing that they mean something to someone, even if they don't mean anything to you, but you're absolutely assured that it'll get across?
Yeah.
Put it on the blockchain.
Yeah, but how many hashes is that going to take to even be able to process that sale, man? So
I don't know.
Okay. That's not even how hashes work.
You win.
Sorry. Yeah.
So this is the concept of you can literally sell non-existing items by creating a digital entry for them.
Non-consumable. So think of a beautiful picture.
Got it.
You'd be like, okay, you got one in mind?
Yeah, it's my wife. Why would you even ask that? What the hell? So offensive. Okay, yeah, I'm thinking.
You could sell that picture.
I would never. All right, sorry. Yes, I could sell
a
a
different picture.
All right.
You could sell that and somebody would value it.
Yeah.
And part of the reason why it's so, and if it's say it's a painting, though, it's precious because it's the one and the only. No, you could sell prints also, but those would be a little bit cheaper. Well, with a non-fungible token, they're literally just images. They have to be some sort of image on the internet.
Yep.
And they have a particular place on a blockchain, an electronic database. But that doesn't mean it's the only place to procure that image. So, for instance, the founder of Twitter, Jack Dorsey, recently sold an image of his first tweet on as an NFT. And somebody paid $2.9 million worth of a particular cryptocurrency for that. $3 million for an image that I can go on Google Images, just type in first tweet by Jack Dorsey, see a picture of it. I could print it out. I could frame it. I can get it for free.
There has never in my lifetime been a more convincing argument for the existence of demons than this. Yeah, we are like, imagine the joke on us. It's like, oh, I bet I can get them to actually spend caloric energy selling pictures that are just the modification of pixels on a screen, repeatable at any instance. But you know what? I mean, obviously, I jest, but it's not actually that far off from most financial techniques, which is what's really being sold is our envy. What's really being sold is like opportunity. What's really being sold is the ability to convince the other guy that you can sell it for more.
Right.
So it's just saying like, hey, since we have a money economy where we're all buying, printing, selling money itself, It's just another way of doing that, but providing some kind of meme gimmick on top of it. But the thing is, it already was working. We already just sell money as money and sell loans and sell debts and sell like everything is for sale.
Everything's for sale. One last modern example of that. Have you heard of this new company called New?
No.
It is the strangest thing. You literally go online and say, should I eat Chinese or Korean tonight? And people pay to vote on what you should do. So, oh man, I'm really into like Marc's eating habit. Like when he breaks his writing fasts, I really think you can pay $5 to vote that's what you should do.
This isn't true.
And then you have to do it.
This isn't a company. How's that?
It's real life.
Why would you ever do that?
I think there's something kind of grossly sexual in it where you feel like you're dominating somebody else. I think that's
why they're the one giving you the options.
Oh, you mean why would I ever sell my, dinner choice? Is that your question?
I guess I have questions all around. Okay.
Well, I think there's something about, being in touch with the global web existence that people are now obsessed with. I think that the more that they can kind of translate living online is a thing for them. I think there is a kind of a dominating spirit, something pagan that comes up with it. But the most horrifying part of all this is that literally people are selling their wills. And so it does go completely against the idea of politics as having its end in virtue, because you have to will the good for the good's own sake. And if you're only willing it because you're getting, $30 to will it.
Okay. All right.
And there's just something weird about it.
This is too much. I mean, this is obviously,
okay,
but it's obviously demons, but like, let's just like most people would never, like this is a minuscule portion of our friends and neighbors who are selling their wills. Right? Like new is going to be old very quickly. I just declare right now in the name of Jesus, I cast that out.
Okay, I like it.
I cast that out. May your stocks fall. Die.
But to go back to what does ail us is that the configurations for how we've set up our society are already in place for something like this to exist.
Sure.
The fact that we see our homes just as ours and no one else's, and that we or the money that we've earned is being something that I have earned and therefore I get to spend however I would like.
Yeah.
Really suggests that we do see everything for sale in terms of we have created these false boundaries in life.
And we've taken infinity money numbers when the only way for money to be efficacious is through the actual wealth of the world, which is finite. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like you can't, at some point there has to be real goods. Mm-hmm. And so you can see why a love of money for its own sake has a sort of lustful, consumptive quality to it, that it immediately has to take over everything, because the things and stuff of this earth can never be divided into enough discrete units to make up what money is, because money isn't real.
Yeah.
But
it's point number 2.
Okay, so if your city is just selling everything,
then
selling space,
greed takes over. Now, this one kind of sounds
He
bland.
says that greed takes over.
Number 2, greed takes
sounds
over.
like another way of describing the.
Well, it sounds really
problem.
bland, but I think there's something profound behind it if we think about it for a second. And it's
Profundity and Aquinas?
no, really.
Okay.
Money is. We've said this. This goes back to I think our very first Good Money episode. That money's a placeholder,
Right.
But it's a non-revealing sign. It doesn't tell you what it is for.
Right.
That's when we have to put in our own ingenuity and just saying, yeah, it is just a placeholder for some real good of God's good creation.
Name it. Yeah.
I got to figure out. Yeah, I got to name it. Say which, what is it? What is it for? But if we're just if the accumulation of riches is our end, then we will never really know what it is for. We'll always think that it's just for security or because this is what we should be doing, and it's never for the procurement of something real. And as a result, if we never have that understanding of what our placeholder is holding a place for, then we're going to always be threatened by greed.
Totally. And the joke's on the greedy people.
It's totally on the greedy
Because the people that aren't greedy end up with things. and happiness.
Not necessarily.
Well, that's true. They're usually deprived and oppressed. But
or they're just prodigals and they end up in pigsties.
Well, that happens too, I suppose. Yeah. Well, here's what I have to say. There are many nuances one could give, but podcasting isn't the place for nuances. I say that the big problem with greed is that it is a real you're impoverished because you have abstract power, but you fear more than anything the loss of that abstract power for the sake of activity, for something actual. Mm-hmm. And that is a difficult and sad way to live.
It is.
Yeah.
There's nothing more to say about that. Well, except for this. St. Thomas says that the way out of this is through liberality. Oh, totally. Because liberality is about knowing how to use money well.
Yeah.
Which is the exact opposite of greed, where you don't know what money's for. Totally. And so part of the way that we just start to rehabituate ourselves out of this is by figuring out how to spend money for actual things really well, instead of living in our abstractive fiction of I just must always accumulate. Not even always accumulate. I just can't spend. Totally. And I think that just if fear takes over, you never get to live. It's no fun. Does our society do this?
Some people.
Yeah, this one's tough, actually.
I think that, I mean, you asked the question, I mean, like, obviously, how do I put it? It's hard to say because our wealthy have accumulated most of the wealth. And so while you can point to them and say, see, they have an apparently limitless drive for acquisition, mm-hmm. It's difficult to say whether everyone else does because most people don't have the capacity. Now, there's the famous Steinbeck quote, right? That there are no poor in America, only temporarily embarrassed millionaires. Mm. And I think, in my experience, it's a very true observation, right? That like people view themselves as just failed Jeff Bezos. Like, so their poverty, even their socialism sometimes is just like an act by which they wish that they could get as much money as they could possibly get. They just don't happen to get it because of their lack of power or just fortune, you know?
Yeah.
So they have no change of heart. Really, they are just a greedy person frustrated in the ends of greed, mm-hmm. which I guess seems kind of worse, materially speaking, although there's probably more opportunities for conversion where you could like sit back and be like, you know what, this greed ain't get me anywhere.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's true of everyone, right? Because I've just met many people who just aren't greedy, who are content, yep. whose wealth is in children and places and like particular relations, and in the glory that comes with living together in Christian life. Maybe I've got shutters on or blinders on, but that seems like certainly more people than billionaires. They're outnumbered.
That's true. I think that's certainly...
Well, we got them surrounded, boys.
It's just we just threw stats out, you know. It must be true. I think there's something also about this inside of Thomas is that we have to remember that it's in the context of a city that's organized around accumulation as its end. It's not just that the individuals have said, you know, money is my end.
Totally.
But it's that the organization, the order of the city has that as its end. And so it doesn't really need to be the case that greed is so apparent in a person's heart, but just that they do the things that a greedy person does.
Right, because the society is structured in a way that's the easiest way to live.
Exactly. Yeah.
Freaking yeah, man. Yeah. And you know what? This happens all the time. You'll sort of talk about if you're trying to help to revitalize a city or to do any good work in town. I'm talking about our city. Mm-hmm. Often one of the problems you run into is that people have no mindset for what successful like city life revitalization looks like outside of economic growth. Yeah. So like you want to do good, you want to alleviate suffering, you want your city to thrive in a vague sense, and that immediately gets shunted in the like purely like pro-business thing, where it's just like, well, then I guess what we need is to make our buildings more available for corporations to fit us into their algorithm so that they'll open up a Subway downtown. And then you're like, wait a minute, why the hell do we want a Subway? Yeah. And so what I try to do is when I talk with people like this, it's like, okay, so what I want is growth in happiness, right? So like the mark of a city that's revitalizing has got to be that everyone is becoming happier mm-hmm. who's within it. And this is actually, I mean, it sounds sort of trite, but it's a paradigm shift. It's like growth itself doesn't necessarily mean happiness,
Yeah.
right? Like if, a company moved in, brought on all its workers from Texas and started producing like brass knuckles for hitting people with, there would be an increase in economic growth. But no one in the actual city would be happier. Just people from elsewhere are making more money. This is actually what happens with fracking. Sorry, I'm on a high horse now.
Get it.
But it's just really annoying because everyone, like in the Rust Belt, everyone's like, okay, we finished our last big industrial thing. Now it's fracking. We got to get fracking. That's going to get all the money going. And it's like, it always seems to be the case that all of the actual workers are coming from other places. They're bringing workers with them, usually from Texas. And it's nothing against Texas. It's just like the lie that's sold to the Rust Belt is that you're back to work because we found some new industrial production. But it's like, yeah, well, you're not back to work. Your economy is back to work.
Yep.
And so, you get some kickbacks with like taxes and stuff. But, that just goes to the police and then.
Yep.
Anyway, it's not the point.
But jump back to your earlier point. Yes. I mean, I remember somebody talking about revitalization in our town and saying we really got to get like finance industries here because that's how Dallas did it.
Right.
They were going down. We got to get back up. But that's the mindset of like walking through our downtown, which probably has 3/4 of the buildings boarded up right now.
No, half.
On maybe I'm just thinking of on 4th Street on our kind of the main strip, which I think is the majority. But it's that's just the goal there is just to get people inside the buildings. And obviously that's no good goal.
Yeah. I mean, what are we doing?
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I think I would answer that our cities as a whole are structured towards this.
Yeah. We don't have, we often lack the imagination for what success looks like without just acquisition.
But I agree with you. I don't think this is the main disposition of somebody.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. And in particular, if we were to say this is the case, then I would just be citing, well, I mean, it's not a reason not to do it, but then we would just be put in the classic capitalist camp where the average the capitalist theorists were all statists. They all thought that people really were in this war of all against all. We're vicious, we're greedy, and therefore you needed the state to come in to ensure that the rivalry, that the war turned into free market competition. This is spelled out by pretty much every single modern theorist of capitalism, but that's not the conclusion at all that the Catholic Church comes to, that people cannot descend so far into depravity that we just actually become beasts. So anyways.
Yeah. No, I think we're all
there
right.
It is. We're all right. Number 3, if your city as a whole has the accumulation of riches as its end, then the public good will be despised and everybody will be after their own private profit. He actually said that.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. All right,
well, describe a little bit the public good.
So the public goods here in Aquinas is used interchangeably with the common good, but the common good in a particular way. Should I break it down? I'm going to break it down. You stop me if I'm breaking it out too much. There are really 3 ways that the common good are used in St. Thomas. The first is what we might call a predicative common good. It's so nerdy. Can we call it something else?
No.
Okay. And this is a good that just everybody has. So say that everybody is healthy in your society. Well, we can call that a common good, not so much because there's something generally that no, let me put that positively. We can only say that it's a common good because it's literally common. Everybody has it. It's to say like patience is a really good common good for a society to have, but that's only ever actualized insofar as each individual is patient. This is a way of this predicative label is what we use when we're trying to categorize species. We can put this each individual critter in the same species because they all have this attribute in common. So that's predicative common good, and that's not the way that he's using the term here. He uses the term public good, which in the de regno, where we're taking all this from, is interchangeable with the causal common good. Now, the causal common good is, you can think of an army. And an army has a certain structure, an arrangement, a hierarchy to it that gives people their own individual direction. Without an order, you really don't have an army at all. I mean, you just kind of have a blob of people. But if you do have this order, it's not only then going to prove to be a strong force as a whole, but it's also going to be informative for each person there.
Right.
So there's an order that's a good for all, that's greater than any one individual, but it also only is manifested. Its goodness is only manifested in the lives of each individual too. Mm-hmm. So St. Thomas also talks about a family in the same way, this family order in this causal common good way. Now, there's a third way that you can understand the common good, and that's actually always in the plural. It's common goods. So you might say that as like public piping, money, because those are goods that not each individual owns, that they're collective around the town. But anyways, in this case, he uses the term public good, which is equivalent. I looked up every case of this with the causal common good, and that is what is going to be sacrificed when everybody's trying to accumulate their own good, which is then privatized. So,
okay,
what do you make of that?
Well, I think I need an example of this happening in a society. So, when a public good is when no one cares about the public good, they all pursue their private gain.
Yeah.
Just give me an example.
So, what comes to mind first is how could he come to this idea? And I think it's this, is that if you're always putting your money to work, then you're never going to spend it on things that won't augment your wealth.
Sure.
So in other words, I think that just the fact that we've seen a huge rapid decline in public arts, in the life of leisure, of plays, festivals, things where you're just blowing your money, I think that's partly due to the fact that people do not care about building up a culture that does give their cities an order, but rather are spending their money on making more money.
Or where they do, it's because they have arranged some system by which, through a nonprofit, a grant foundation, the giving of money to those kinds of expenditures actually gets them money through tax write-offs in the end.
Yeah, that's a great point.
So I think it's not just that you see a decline in these things. You also see the corporatization of their production.
Yes.
Because it's like the only people willing to make an expense are still working within their self-interest. Mm-hmm. So you get a lot of you get a lot of lame art, lame festivals.
Yeah, and then nobody is really able to feel like they contributed to it. Not, if you have a festival, like we have the First Fridays festival coming up. Now
tomorrow.
You created this thing, so you can actually
Many created this.
It was your brainchild.
Yeah,
right?
Myself and Therese then Nelson.
Yeah, and
she rocks.
And so though I don't have a formative part in this, just being able to go and support in the little ways that I can, you're like, wow, this is something that we all do together.
We do it together,
this is awesome. And it does. I mean, it totally transforms the way that we, think and interact and talk in our city. I mean, It is part of the causal common good. It's part of the public good. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But if there was just some, like the city put it on, where whoever the city is, then I wouldn't really feel a connection to it.
Right. And if it was obviously just done for the profit, we don't make anything on it. We beg other people, literally in the city, to be able to have the money we need to do things like the festival. And that literally demands participation, but it also means that when you come, it's not a product, in the sense of it's not like, okay, they're selling this.
Yep.
And if it's worth it insofar as this sort of exchange is a good exchange.
Yep.
It's like, no, it's something that we're either all doing because we all like it or we won't do.
Yep.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. I think that you do see a lack of care, like a lack of care for the public good within societies, but less a lack of care, because I really think everyone wants to live in community. Everyone wants thriving cities. Everyone knows. I mean, you gotta know that, like, yeah, you can build your really sweet in-home theater and have your pool, but at the end of the day, you don't want to stay in your house, right? Like, it doesn't matter how cool your house is. Like, you want to be a city person, like not necessarily like living in the city, but you want a community of others in which to have your life recognized and to recognize the life of others. I mean, really, you want to be in the church, but that it's not so much that people despise that. I think, I mean, sure, there's probably some straight up hoarders, sort of Scrooges in the world. I have met at least one, but I think a lot of it's just people are confused about how to get it, because they're educated to think that the only way you get community is extrinsically, right? So, you know, a kind of liberal narrative of us is that we start as individuals, and then because we perceive a benefit to coming together in community, we do so, right? So we form cities together for protection against, you know, evils. You know, I think Rousseau says, you know, even marriages are sort of extrinsically formed by individuals for the sake of reproduction, and then they dissolve once that happens. So this is like in our psyche, I think, very deeply. So whenever we want to achieve this sort of nebulous but enticing good of community, the only avenues our brains sort of start to trickle down is like, okay, how do I motivate the individuals, you know, as individuals to do something communally, right? And then that's when you always start thinking about profit, about business. So it's like, well, we got to get, you know, a business to, you know, put on some kind of event, or we should get a restaurant in town that can be profitable here. And so then, and it's like, it's not that these things can't be means to it, but what's missed is that it is a good in itself. Community is a good in itself. It's not just the accumulated good of little individuals that if they're all happy, well, then we have this thing called community. That's not true at all. Actual communal happiness is a unique experience that can't be dissolved into a bunch of individual happiness. It's like, and anyone who's been to a really good party feels this, right? Like they are alive with the spirit of the whole. It's awesome. But I think because we feel like scared of that, of that power that's within us to celebrate existence in a community, we immediately start thinking about it as just individual needs satisfaction or something. I mean, use language of therapy and talk about community as a need that fulfills the individual, as if the individual is not the thing that fulfills community. I mean, it's just, anyway, sorry. These tend to end in rants, I think.
Well, and it's kind of more impressive that Thomas just kind of named these things without expanding on it.
Well, he was the pure of heart, right? So he didn't have this sort of like itchy need to like prove anything. He was just like, this is the way it be.
Well, good thing we could take over.
Don't worry, Aquinas. We're anxious and nervous about the good society.
Yeah.
He had a confidence in heaven, I think. So I think, you know, when you have someone that, I mean, he's literally a saint, sticking his head in the tabernacle to worship God, he's probably not sitting there like panicking over the worldly societies. He can describe it at some distance and say, but you know, all things will be redeemed in Christ. Yeah. Whereas I have to like scream that to myself.
Fourth thing. If a city has the accumulation of riches as its end, then all people will live in the same city. Isn't that weird? It's kind of like, wait, what do you mean by that?
The city, okay.
So I actually had to go through and figure this one out, because I was like, wait, that kind of sounds like he means that he's like predicting globalization. Well, it's actually a citation from Aristotle's Politics, in which Aristotle predicts globalization. So it pretty much is. and within the Aristotle's section on this, he's particularly talking about trading with other cities. That if everyone's goal is the accumulation of riches, then you're going to start to have the same laws. You're going to have the same ways of doing
to
business.
Facilitate exchange.
To better facilitate exchange, easier exchange, so that making money might become easier. And so,
boom,
as a result, we're all going to live in the same city.
In one global city, man. That's so cool.
It is cool. It's also just
You
extremely.
know what I like about the world is being able to drive for thousands of miles and then eat the same burger.
That's the real reason I go to England, because they have the same burgers over there, and they're
Yes, the KFC in Oxford.
awesome. There's an inordinate appreciation of KFC in England.
I don't get why.
I have no idea.
Is it better there?
I've never tried it over there. That's a great regret of mine. Now that I'm permanently here, it's really sad.
I'm just imagining a guy.
You're in England. Ship me some KFC.
I imagine a guy who has like a pilgrimage where he goes as far as he can to like a Starbucks, like who like
there was the burger joint called Whataburger.
Yeah,
in the South, there was a family they went to every single one of the Whataburger locations.
Anyways, what are we talking about?
St. Thomas
living in the same
Globalization.
In the same city.
Yeah, I mean this one's really interesting because it immediately makes us take a look at the medieval assumptions about that. It says that if everything's the same, then nowhere is actually being able to live out in a personal way.
Yeah, and if money is the goal, and money is by definition a unifying thing, right? Because it unifies two people within an exchange. Mm-hmm. Then it's directly opposed to culture, understood as difference, right? It's literally sameness versus difference, kind of on the playing field. And what I mean by that is that if you look at custom and law, I would say are two things that stand out as like, well, what makes a particular people, as opposed to just, a suburb of a city.
Right.
And you say, well, if their customs are different, if their laws are different, right, then they are different people in some way. And you could talk about other things like the spices they use in their food, but you're just talking about custom. You're just reducing things to tasty dishes, which is unfortunately what we tend to do when we talk about globalization. But custom and law being different is an obstacle to a financial class that just wants to make money as its own end. You can imagine this in our discussion concerning the just price. If prices vary according to custom, then you have a difficulty in trading, right? Because you have to take into account the particular custom of pricing. If there's actually a different custom by which things are bought and sold, then you can't do it from a distance. You have to enter into the particular society, figure out the particular custom, figure out the particular laws, obey the laws, follow the customs in order to make the exchange happen, right? So it makes sense that as you see a rise of a sort of global financial elite, you also see a rise of global liberalism, really. I mean, a destruction of diverse languages, diverse customs, diverse laws, and a kind of unifying of the globe in some ways. I mean, this is obvious stuff. The question is more like, how do we get out of it than whether it's here? But you know what might be helpful? This is a helpful analogy that I've been thinking about because I'm writing about it today. So it might also show up in an essay. A lot of the pursuit of money, I think, is really based on fear.
Oh, yeah.
Like you can talk about greed as this sort of abstract desire for gain, but when you really poke at it, like, why do you abstractly desire gain? What you tend to get to is what you said, security, right? The desire is not just like, I like big numbers better than medium numbers. It's like, no, the world's scary. It's full of death, disease, disaster, and all sorts of undesirable things in between. And money can serve as a store, a stockpile against that. Christ discusses stockpiling in terms of the amassing of grain in barns, but the idea is the same, right? You make an amassment because you're trying to secure a future that you can't possibly secure. Jesus says this is stupid because you're going to die anyways, no matter how big your barn is.
Yeah. First Marc with a C.
That's right.
2:8.
2:8. And he also says that there is no way that you're ever going to be able to get around this by replacing your blood with young people's blood. So that's important, I think, to the billionaire class of today. But that's not why I started this. Oh, right. But fear then actually has this quality of what Aquinas calls contraction. So when he describes fear, describes it as a kind of gathering in. He says the reason that your fingers get cold and your limbs go numb is because your vital spirits, the heat of the body itself, is all amassing and gathering at a single point of safety. It's literally an anti-distributive feeling. If you think of life as being distributed throughout the body, you kind of feel it everywhere. But now you're really scared. It's like, ooh, goes in. And I actually think this is like totally true. I mean, I don't know if I would describe it as the movement of vital spirits, but that's because I don't know anything about the body and what medievals meant when they talked about anatomy or anything like that.
What's vital, what's not vital. Yeah. So many spirits.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a way in which when you see the accumulation of wealth for its own sake and the kind of gathering in of a diversity into a uniformity, you're not just seeing money, kind of doing something abstractly. You're actually seeing fear play out on a social level. So as the human body in fear tends to reduce its sort of vital diversity into a center, and this is how Aquinas describes it. So a society, once you gather in the resources, once you actually start, when your goal becomes wealth accumulation, right? It by definition means it's not wealth distribution. And it's wealth distribution that to some extent produces diversity in a society. Because if only a very few people have all of the wealth, then obviously the culture itself is going to take after the image of those few people rather than, a greater distribution of wealth among people. I mean, because to some respect, some kind of wealth is what helps to make culture and make custom and make law and all this stuff. So I think that there's a way in which the misuse of money is just fear happening on a social level. We're just watching the social body contract into itself.
Yeah. And you said, so how do we get out of this? This is really tough because, I mean, you could talk about finding McDonald's in Norway or whatever, but just the mere fact that one city in the US is pretty much indistinguishable when you're leaving it to entering the next. I mean, you cannot tell when you're leaving one city and entering the next one, other than like a little sign on the side of the road. And that's it. Everything just really flows together. And versus like you look at old villages in England where it's a ton of buildings clumped together, tons of green space, and then you drive down the road, 10, 20 miles and you get another little clump. And because our cities in the US are set up the way that they are, it makes actually distinguishing our towns pretty tough from one another. And I didn't really know how to get around that other than moving to the Rust Belt where there were small and more distinguishable towns.
Yeah, although, I would hardly be the first to pretend that the towns of the Rust Belt are not simply involved in envious business imitation of other places,
I completely
which does
agree.
create a uniformity of look. I mean, anyone who's driven the American countryside can tell you it's not
I think the only
experience of diversity and
yeah, no kidding at all. I think the thing that makes Soonville feel like it's cut off a little bit from the rest is the fact that we actually have the Ohio River. There's like a real geographical change.
No, and don't get me wrong. I think there's I just maybe I'm an optimist here. But I think, okay, look, you can screw up the stores and every city has an off-ramp with the gas station and blah, blah, blah. But people are really different and custom doesn't die.
Yeah.
It's so, you can't kill that in people unless you really, really try. And then you're going to hell. So don't do it. Custom, the particularization of I mean, even when people are degraded and oppressed, in that they become particularized. I mean, like you think about, I don't know. I just think that there's even like, in our particular slice of the world, we really suffer a lot of depravity, the opioid crisis, but there are ways of speaking and thinking about that and ways of grieving and ways of that just inevitably are particularized because people are particular because everyone's an ex nihilo creation of God. So I don't think so there's a reason to sort of be grouchy of the complete sort of leveling effect of the desire for gain that everywhere does sort of start to, in a certain respect, become the same city. But that in a certain respect is important because it's insofar as people are actually involved in trade, the storefronts, the businesses, a lot of the buildings, a lot of the way the land is cut off and structured. But I think the way out of that is to take what is particular and the customs that have not been destroyed and to just obscenely valorize them, make them into festivals, find the differences and celebrate them in a real way. And then try not to sell out to the man, because what tends to happen is once you have something unique and you're proud of, the moment that it like comes up from the ground, people that want to just capitalize on it make it into a product, and then it becomes homogenous again. It's really sad. I mean, this is a huge problem, right? Like, you're trying to improve a city, right? But if you get to a certain point of improvement, then your city is now profitable, right? For others who don't particularly care about the customs, right? They just want a repetition for more profit. So, I mean, I'm actually suggesting that when you work to have your city not be so obsessed with money, you also do it in such a way that you don't look profitable. You kind of hide from that homogenizing impulse that the merchants of this world have.
Yep.
You know, and maybe, I don't know, maybe that means breaking your windows, you know, sort of ritualistically, and then taking pictures and saying, hey, look, this town is
That's interesting.
rubbish.
I wouldn't necessarily recommend people jump right into that idea. But yeah, something along those lines. I like.
All right.
Well, okay. That's enough on globalization. Number 5, he says that good faith will be destroyed in the way of trickery opened. I like how he put that. So
the way of trickery opening sounds like a roller coaster ride, like opening up for the first time. Have you gone on the way of trickery yet? It's finally open. Sorry, it's stupid.
Well, yeah, but that's okay. I found it funny anyway. Good faith, obviously, like if you're not going to put love first, put virtue first, then you're going to put accumulation first. But I think this is kind of the this is the real thing, is that if your first goal is not to have friends, which is really where virtue leads you. Virtues make you more relational in the Christian tradition, as the Christian tradition understands it. So that makes you set up to have friends, divine friends with, you know, that we call, who are friends of God, we call saints, you know. So if you're not looking to become a friend and to have good friends, then you're not going to really care about being good to others as your first priority.
Sure, yeah.
And so maybe the kind of flip it around and say, and put it like this might help a little bit, that if you are putting business before friends, then you're not going to have any friends in business.
Sure.
I think that's the truism that he knew, and
and
how he got here.
And what becomes friendship, or what replaces it within greed, are those comfortable relationships of mutual gain.
Yeah.
And I think that's important, because a lot of times there's this like distraction, because we think that the only greedy person, the only image that we can come up with is like, again, like Scrooge. So like there are no people in his life. Everyone hates him. He hates everyone. And he's just like clutching his gold coins. And I do think in a way that's a real image of the soul, but I think that can be distracting if we expect that of social life. Actually, what it looks like is just casual use of people. So it's not that you're not friendly. Everyone is friendly. It's not that you're not nice. Literally everyone's nice. That's what it means to be normal, is for people to look at you and say, oh, well, I guess he's nice. And so people are nice and open to conversations and have fun hobbies, like they play racquetball or whatever. But the point is that all of those relations and all of that niceness and friendliness and normalness and politeness are all held in suspense, because it's only insofar as they serve gain that they're there. You know, one of the things about living in a post-Christian society is you still have to act at least enough like a Christian in order to gain anything, right? Like if I show up at the boardroom with a gun and I'm like, we're doing things my way because I'm the freaking chief, right? Well, that does sound effective, but it probably wouldn't be effective in the long run, right? Because there's like, we still enforce justice and like good behavior. And if you're just an impolite brute, then people get mad at you and you don't gain. But it's no virtue to say like, oh, yeah, he's if the reason why you aren't brutish and aren't just seizing is because you can't, in order to really get goods, that you have to be a good communicator in business and all that stuff. It's like, you're the same as the guy with the gun. It's just that since guns aren't effective, you're using other weapons. But the motivation is still, let's get what I can get.
Yep. Yeah.
And so I think we enjoy these like relationships of casual use because we still live in a society where you need a modicum of, and not even a modicum, you need a lot of politeness and friendship and a sense of being able to like do things together as a community. I mean, you think about the fact that like no business or company is going to thrive unless the guy at least pretends that you're all part of an exciting mission that's going to like make the world a better place, right? You have to pretend that, because if you say, okay, we're in it for me making profits and you making wages, let's go. It's just not going to motivate.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not going to motivate, but it's also not going to lead beyond a relationship in the boardroom.
Sure.
That's another side to it. I mean, there is something.
Right. You can't call the other guy when you're sick.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And some folks, really say like, you shouldn't do business with your friends. I've heard that a lot. I heard that a lot growing up. I mean, I heard that all the time. Don't let money get in between you and friends, which also means that you can't really, like, you should really question whether or not they get involved in business with them.
Right.
And I think there's something to that insofar as friendship is ever self-giving. With money, you do have to break things up and cut up people's earnings, which is totally, as we've talked so many times about, inorganic. It's unnatural. It doesn't fit with reality. And so all of a sudden you're trying to bring in something unnatural into a friendship.
Sure.
But that the whole point of doing business at all is taking care of the needs of your family and your friends. And so there's two different value sets they're going on at play. And I think this, like what you're pointing out, is really the core of it. It's like, is the interactions here to aid friendship or to aid gain? And it's also just strange to think about, if I figure out that somebody's only hanging out with me to get something out of it, I'm going to say, I don't really want to hang out with you anymore.
Sure,
You're
yeah.
kind of creepy, actually.
Sure, right.
And so what I'm trying to say is that our society's full of creeps.
or tricky people.
Yeah, and tricky people.
Well, I mean, I'm wondering, so the question is, of course, whether the city
This city's like
is
that or
obsessed.
not,
So I
yeah.
can see this on a social level, the level of the city itself. What is it like to exchange friendship for trickery? And I think in some ways it's sort of everything that we've talked about, because you have, when virtue isn't the goal, when friendship isn't the goal, and everyone's after their private gain, then all of those goods become just means of tricking people into doing something that does produce private gain, right? So this goes back to what I was just saying, that you have to have at least some semblance of the good in order to motivate people to do the things that create the gain. So it's not like evil is always a privation, right? Like, you need the good in order to make any kind of viciousness work. But that's kind of what trickery means, right? It means holding up a good, but then it's not really there.
Right. Yep.
And so I think having those experiences, which do characterize a lot of our society, in which you're pursuing actual goods, but you're dealing with people that only pursue them with you insofar as they're continuing to gain.
Right. Yeah.
I find this all the time with more like bureaucratic institutions, where it's like, you have this problem, you have this need, your license is suspended, no one tells you why. And you find that people they can hear your human plight, but it is only insofar as it's part of their job orientated towards a certain amount of gain that you're actually, taken under the wing, which is.
Yeah. Or, they only follow you insofar as they're getting paid $15 an hour to do so, something of that
There
sort.
was a particular institution that.
Name the name.
I won't name the name, but they really wanted whoever they were to give vaccines, and they were pumped about this, and so they were talking about coming to one of our festivals and doing it. And I was like, well, okay, like our festival starts at 6, and they were like, oh well, we're off the clock. So, I was like, sorry, I mean, well, but it was fascinating to me because it's like, okay, so this is an institution that literally is like, we want to save lives.
Yeah.
Like we want to free people from the plague, and we want to show up and do it. And then if it's not on the clock, it's like, and I get it. Like, why work off the clock? That's sort of how the structure is. It's just funny that it's just obvious when you find people that are really motivated by gain and other things just serve as like the.
I know. Well, I remember when, this will be controversial, but I'm going to go for it. There were 15 people in Oxford, which has a population of 150,000 or so, that had COVID. So it was pretty much a non-issue. And yet we were totally 100% locked down. Well, not 100%. We were allowed to have see somebody from one other household. Mm-hmm. That was it. Mm-hmm. And at that point, that just feels disingenuous to me. That there is big pharma involved, that there is like money to be made, and there's a potential that hadn't been reached in accumulation. And so I think this trickery really does.
We're sneaking in COVID complaints.
I'm here. I'm in the land of the free again. I'm happy. All right, last one.
Oh, that's right. Sorry, I forgot we were doing this.
Virtue. I can crumple this up now that we've gone through this. Virtue. The prize of virtue, which is honor.
Yeah.
Is will no longer be given to the virtuous, but rather to the rich.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And therefore, virtue itself will be destroyed.
Yeah.
So,
well, first of all, just conceptually, that makes sense.
Yeah.
If the goal of your society is money, then the people that attain the goal are your heroes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
Whereas if the goal is virtue, then the virtuous people are the heroes.
Yeah, and you find quite a number of these. Magazines are both filled with Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, as well as the person that's run off to Africa and created a new foundation and such. Of course, there's probably some things to be said about foundations.
Yeah, but that could also be Bill Gates.
Yeah. So the magazines are about Bill Gates.
Yeah, I think that in this you do see something in our society, but it is tempered. I mean, again, it's a complicated world because we are all a church that is, we're working really hard to not be one, but we still are. And so we value not just power, but virtue. Mm-hmm. And so we spend a lot of our time, our idolization of the rich is ambiguous, I think, because I think we might be impressed by them, or we'll run stupid articles about like, here's why he's so highly effective, and then give his like habits because we kind of want to be him because we want to be rich.
Yeah.
But actual fawning adulation, like actual like you get honor for your success, I think is actually extremely rare. And when it occurs, it's usually in like just circles of other finance people that are.
I think that's true. Yeah. Everybody who hopes to be an entrepreneur really looks up to those who succeeded in that. And I think there's like genuine like praise, for the in the hearts of those people, for those who had achieved it. Agree, the kind of the finance guys as well. But if you're but if you just want to kind of live your life and be good to your family and stuff like that, I don't really think that you look up to Jeff Bezos at all. You might be really impressed with the techniques that he used, find those fascinating, and how he created like an empire of sorts. But you don't really want to, you don't really praise him.
I wouldn't say you honor him in Aquinas' sense,
Yeah.
Which is hopeful. So. But I do think we honor virtue.
Well, maybe
but less publicly.
Yeah, and I actually don't know how he uses the term honor. So
Okay.
that could be. So if it is in a sense where there is like a genuine appreciation and fraternal love and gratitude for that person, that's one thing. If it's another where it's like when I think of a saint, I mean, John Paul II, kind of the first that I really felt this way about was like, the more that I got to know him, the more that I really wanted to love whom he loved. The more that I wanted to have a more intimate relationship with Christ, to know what the church was, to know her truths, to live in them. And so in a particular sense, I did want to become John Paul II. Like, he inspired me to do the things that he did in certain ways. But if we apply that to Bezos, it doesn't necessarily have to come along, or like somebody who's young, entrepreneurial, doesn't necessarily mean that they want to be or like him in any personal way, or feel gratitude towards him, like, oh, thank God for Amazon. But it is that desire, as he said, to want to be him in a certain way. But because it's an evil desire or an evil type of honoring, it doesn't have a real desire to unite with that person.
Sure.
So St. Thomas talks about the two types of friend, or two aspects of friendship, is that you will the others good and you want to unite with them. So both factors have to apply. Like, if there's somebody that you want to sleep with, you crave the unity but not their good.
Sure.
If you're unmarried and not married to that person, I guess all that has to be said.
It.
Yeah, there you go. You got it. Yeah. But then on the other side, like, you might wish somebody's good, but actually not care really about having like an active relationship with them, uniting with them in any way. A beggar on the street you might pass and say, I wish you well, but then there's no life together that happens. So, but both of those things, the unity and the wishing of the other's good, has to be there for friendship. And you might, that just doesn't apply within a system in which you might honor somebody because they've achieved what you wanted to achieve, but there's no desire for the unity with that person.
Yeah. And it's difficult because the bestowing of honors is usually a civic act, right? But since cities are just sort of corporations these days, they tend to bestow honors on people that they think are increasing their tax base. You know what I mean? Like, once you're running everything without any sense of a genuine belonging together, that's a good, quite apart from the money you're making and your own sort of self-preservation, then you end up with an adulation. I think cities end up with an adulation of the wealthy still. But it's described as, it's this sort of weird, very kitschy love of like businessmen as being like somehow the only thing that your community is really made up of. Yeah, I think you see this a lot in cities. Yeah, right. Yeah. The actual adulation of virtue, right? To say, here's a person who is perfect in long suffering. Here is a man who is chaste, incredibly chaste, and to bestow upon him honors, right, is almost unimaginable in our society. Like, what that would look like makes no sense, which is lucky for the virtuous, because they probably don't care being virtuous. But it also means that we don't even consider virtue as the primary imitation. I mean, if you just sort of grow up in an average American city and you're sort of vaguely aware of the kinds of people that get honor, you're going to become a businessman. I would say certainly not a saint.
Yep.
So in that sense, I do think it's a negative. It's on the scorecard of our cities, whether they're obsessed with money or not. I would say I certainly don't see the civic honoring of the virtuous. I definitely see the civic honoring of the wealthy.
Yeah.
Exceptional cases, firemen.
Yeah, but I haven't heard that much about firemen recently.
Firemen are the solution to everything wrong with our society.
Yeah, I mean, there was
it's
a
an
lot
institution of virtue, only scantily connected with accumulation, gain, wealth, money. Literally, the word volunteer is emblazoned over almost every fire station in America. And whatever that means is almost irrelevant to its sort of advertising potential that volunteering is good, right? Giving. And they are an actual like political entity in some ways, right? They have an office. They're an institution. And yet, despite this, they are so clearly orientated towards the common good. They literally put out our fires that they're not like the way that the libertarians tend to view like political institution as always this kind of like bad thing that we really need like more freedom. No one would say we need more freedom from firefighters and such. Anyway, I just think that there's real radical potential in radicalizing firefighters to be our main image of civic unity. So a city is most properly and first and foremost it's firefighting, it's firefighters, and then everything else kind of comes out from that.
Yeah. Wow.
So anyways,
so we should light up our towns to, encourage this, shouldn't we? Yeah.
No, don't do that.
Secretly. No, maybe a better idea. So this is sad actually for our cities because I think we went 6 for 6 saying that they're all.
No, there were caveats. Well, okay. So yes, but there were a lot of caveats in there about how, one of the things is we barely even really live at a civic level. Or rather, we kind of live in cities, but we don't acknowledge that this is a genuine form of existence. And where a lot of the life and virtue is happening is in sort of large connections of families.
Yeah. Networks almost rather than cities. I think that's
like there are very few people that in their virtues, in their loves, in their finally getting over gain and greed and all of that just nonsense waste of energy. Where you see that and where they actually celebrate and live it is not in such a way that one of those people could stand up and say, I represent Chicago or something like that. They can't, they haven't taken that kind of political power. I mean, I think they should. I think that involves a movement into those offices from virtuous networks of friends. Where else do people take political power except for from some network of friendship and family that is either producing virtuous or vicious people, right? This is sort of Andrew Jones' sort of larger vision of subsidiarity in a distributed economy. That all of this official stuff rests in its actual power on friendship. And so if virtuous friendships and virtuous networks of friends who are actually orientated towards the peace, the common good, are to take office, it's really just them gaining some kind of de facto power that they can use for the good. Why are we saying this? Oh, because it's not that I don't think we have the potential to be cities orientated towards virtue in our politics. I don't think there's anything about our cities that couldn't be. I mean, there's some like constitutional arrangements that you could sort of try and fix. But really, it's just a matter of taking the offices and having good people in the offices.
So that's the end.
To live as a city.
That's how. Yeah. Well, I think when a lot of what we've been talking about over the course of these videos have been like, what can we do to become saints and through the use of our money? And this one is tougher because it really is a collective.
Yeah, totally.
It does take a collective vision of a true understanding of the common good, welcoming others into it, so that there could be a real reorientation away from what we have done and what we can do. So I don't really have too many practical things to offer folks.
But anything a city could do, once you take power within that city and are able to act in its name, which isn't necessarily just through offices. You can just do it by having enough friends within a city. Yeah. I mean, anyone who knows anything knows this. Once you do that, then anything that values virtue over money in a public and recognizable way is the thing to do. I mean, one thing that you could do very simply is develop your own currency. And I don't mean this in some like huge life-changing way. I mean, just think of it as like a city gift card almost that is tradable. Yeah.
So Bristol has done this in the UK. I know. Yeah. I think, what's It's that crazy city up in Syracuse, New York. I think they
Cool.
did it too.
A couple of people did it during COVID.
Yeah, yeah.
But the idea isn't that obviously you're not getting beyond money by developing your own currency. But the point is that you create a currency that's limited in where it can be spent. Right. So right there and then you have a certain check, as it were, on this kind of unlimited, everyone in one city, everyone accumulating gain that has no end kind of vision of the city's goal. And you say, no. Our goal is happiness, right? So money should be such that it actually contributes to our happiness. And one of the ways, not the only ways, but one of the ways to do this is to just say, this is a currency that works but cannot be spent outside of the city. How cool would that be?
Yeah, have Andrew Jones's face put on a little copper piece of metal. That'd be awesome.
I don't know. He's sort of a potato looking guy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think there are.
Yeah,
Wow. Sorry, I can't believe I just agreed to that publicly. Yeah, I mean, I guess there are a few things. I mean, just to run down a list real quick on each of these 6 points, if I can remember them now. I can pull up the piece of paper and throw it away. All things are for sale. So learn skills so that you don't. So things just aren't always for sale. You know, don't spend money on getting a moving company to move your refrigerator. Call up friends. Presume on love. I think that's a big one.
And protest on the sale of goods.
New. Yeah, on wheels.
Protest new. But like beautiful spaces.
Yeah.
You know, like things that have value because of what they do for the common good. Like try with what limited resources Americans have to save them from just being, you know, privatized for. I mean, everything's privatized.
Yeah.
I get that, but we can at least in the kind of public good, and I mean that's just like things that the city owns and kind of can keep. I mean, here it's just very simple. Like people try to buy the parks from the city.
Yeah,
and it's like even if the city is not necessarily doing the best they could do with the park, don't sell the parks. There's only so many things that even have a glimmer of common use and being for the common good. Just save them and then work on making them better as a community.
Totally.
Don't sell out.
That's the tagline for the next one's the greed takes over. So that's the first rule of money. It's just always knowing what your money's holding a place for. Number 3.
Direct taxes would work here.
Direct taxes would totally work.
Like
here.
if you want to. Oh, baby just woke up.
Okay, I'm gonna get. Blaze.
All right, I'm gonna talk about direct taxes, right? All right. One thing that I'm going to speak about here is direct taxes. Oh, right, because the idea is that if you want to actually operate as a city, one of the big problems with cities is that they allow money to remain an abstraction by not being super clear on what the city taxes are for, and they often don't develop like really enticing like why not, instead of, how do I put it? Just say what you want. So you have an office and you want something really cool in a park or whatever it is. Just tell people that's what we want to do as a city. And as your mayor, as whatever, all we need is $10 from everyone to do it. Then take everybody's $10. Boom. You've got $200,000 and you can get the thing. This is really in the end a direct tax. It could also, if it was at will, it could be more just a donation that is sort of worked by your city. But then you would have the clear vision that money is always for a particular good. Like Blaze. What a dude. Hey man. So we're here, if you're not watching on the video, we're here with a young man who has never spent a single dime.
It's incredible. He's gone this long.
It is really good.
We put it even better. Yeah, he hasn't spent money in this whole last year. He went a whole year without spending money.
That's incredible.
That is incredible. Yeah. Good job. How'd you do it? He doesn't want to talk about it.
I get it.
So that's a good way. So the next one is the public good will be sacrificed for private gain.
Yeah.
I think that one is perhaps doing something like what Ruben's doing, just starting up, getting people to volunteer and donate to help start the mystery cycle.
Yeah.
I think that's a good example.
Yeah. So he's doing large theater productions, medieval mystery cycles, and then also Shakespeare and such.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's a good one. So instead of always having your money work, put it to work, or sorry, instead of always putting your money to work so as to gain, put your money to work so as to have festivals and such.
Yeah, and do things that are obviously just for the public good and not for some esoteric way of somebody gaining something. Fireworks should, I mean, people I've been noticing have been saying a lot of negative things about fireworks, that they are just desensitizing Americans to war and explosion. Forget all that.
Whoa, really?
Fireworks are rad.
They're awesome.
And they're one of the few places where you can point to and say, look, we have an expenditure that's purely for the enjoyment of people.
Yeah, we just blew up our money.
We just literally blew up our money. Yeah. Let's do more of it.
Yeah, that's great. Number 4 is globalization. Answer
Trump.
No. Oh my God.
4 more years. 4 more years. I don't know, man. You can't globalize. You can't deglobalize and be a capitalist. I mean, you got to pick one.
Yeah,
that was really the Trump conundrum.
Yeah, that was. Yeah, that's absolutely true. It's absolutely true. That's why, you know, the Austrian school is unequivocally for globalization, unequivocally for a global government too. Yeah. And they wanted one whole global government. Even Murray Rothbard, who's an anti-statist, you know, he was, or so claimed, he wanted a global mechanism of court system, a global court system, a global currency. I mean, he wanted it all.
Well, one way is to one practical thing you can do for your city to not be obsessed with money in this regard is the development of how do I put it? It just like, just don't, maybe this isn't something that's easy to do, but basically don't worry about attracting corporations. Don't, like, once you gain positions of political power, don't let that be he's such a happy baby. Hey dude, you're not a baby anymore, I'm sorry. Don't let that be the marker of success, because then all revitalization and all community building is really just an extended exercise in selling out, right? And this just requires actual, like, backbone in cities and in business people.
Yep. Okay. Good faith is destroyed, and the way of trickery opened.
Go to church.
Okay, good. That's a good one. And then the virtue thing, just raise up, take moments to praise good acts of virtue. How do you do that?
Well, I've seen some different ways of doing it. People will have like a hall of fame, like cities will have a hall of fame where it's just, you get like an artist who can do portraits or maybe small statuettes or something like that. And then every year you pick someone in the community and try not to do it. It would be my advice not to do it democratically, actually, but to have like good people pick virtuous people for the Hall of Fame, because unfortunately, if most people are inspired by greed, then in fact, a democratic, hey, who's going to the Hall of Fame this year, can be like, you know, whoever is doing a great job with his lawn mowing business, and what they're really validating is success and not virtue. All of which is to say, that's a really on the nose way of trying to have a city that values virtue.
You should do that. Let's do it. All right.
It's actually not even strictly my idea. The owner of our bookstore downtown suggested it to me, not
Mr. Marc's,
not specifically in reference to virtues, but I think that's sort of where he was driving at.
Well, let's do it.
Cool.
We hope this inspired some ideas. We hope that you guys will let us know what you've done to help reorient your city towards the good.
And if you listened to this whole thing and thought to yourself, wow, my city is certainly not obsessed with money, good job. You made it.
All right. Till next time, everybody.
Bye-bye.